The question was simple, innocently framed, but it hit me like a freight train. So, how was the romantic weekend? My best friend's voice echoed in my ears, filled with that familiar tone of excitement. She had no idea. She didn't know what I had done, or, more accurately, what I hadn't done. I froze, caught between the urge to tell her everything and the deep-rooted instinct to protect the carefully constructed lie I had been living for months. It was fine, I said, the words leaving my mouth so easily, like they were rehearsed. They didn't feel like mine, and yet they were all I could muster. I smiled, the kind of smile that felt too wide, too forced, like it was stapled to my face. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly, and she tilted her head in that way she always did when she thought something was off. Just fine? I thought this was supposed to be your weekend getaway? No phones, no distractions. You and Jason, alone, finally some time to reconnect. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to breathe. My heart raced, pounding against my chest, and for a moment, I felt like I might collapse right there in front of her. But I didn't. I couldn't. Yeah, I know, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. Things just didn't go as planned. You know how it is. Life gets in the way. Lena didn't look convinced. She never did. We had known each other too long, shared too many secrets, and this? This wasn't something I could just brush off. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, the way she was processing the discrepancy between what I was saying and what she could feel wasn't right. But she didn't press. Not yet. She didn't need to. Yeah, life does that, she replied, her voice softening as she leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass. But you and Jason, you guys always seemed so solid. You know? Like nothing could break you apart. I felt the stab of guilt, sharper than a knife. Jason. My husband. The person I had promised to love, honor, and cherish for better or worse. And here I was, sitting across from my best friend, lying to her face. Worse, I was lying to myself. The weekend had been planned for months. Jason had insisted on it, desperately trying to push through the cracks that had begun to form in our marriage. I had gone along with it because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Make an effort. Reignite the flame. But I had known, deep down, that this weekend wasn't going to save anything. It wasn't the romantic getaway we'd dreamed about. It wasn't about reconnecting or rediscovering what we had lost. It was a last-ditch effort to patch a wound that was already too deep to heal with a few days in a fancy hotel. And yet, I had walked into it with the false hope that maybe, just maybe, it could change something. Instead, I had spent the weekend alone. Jason hadn't even shown up. He called in sick. The truth was, he hadn't been sick at all, he had been in a bar somewhere, nursing a drink, avoiding me, avoiding us. He had never even bothered to explain why he didn't come, and I wasn't sure which hurt more, his absence or the complete lack of care in his voice when he told me over the phone. But I couldn't tell Lena that. I couldn't tell her that the weekend had been spent in an empty hotel room, scrolling through my phone, pretending that everything was fine while I stared out the window, wishing for something different, for a life that didn't feel so cold, so empty. So, what did you two do instead? Lena asked, her voice breaking through the silence, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She was a hopeless romantic, always looking for the fairy tale. My mind raced, scrambling for something to say, anything to fill the space between us. We went to a couple of nice restaurants. Ate some good food. I don't know. It wasn't the most exciting thing. Lena raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're not telling me something. I bit my lip, feeling the heat creep up my neck. There it was again. The sense that she could see through me, that she knew I was hiding something. But what could I say? How could I explain that my marriage had crumbled to dust? How could I explain that the man I had stood beside for years, the one I had promised to love, was slipping away from me piece by piece? Instead, I just took a long sip of my wine and smiled again, a little too brightly this time. Really, Lena? It was fine. Things are just complicated right now. She let out a small sigh, clearly not buying it, but she didn't push. Not yet. I was grateful for that. Okay, she said, her tone gentle, almost cautious. But I know you, Claire. I can tell when something's wrong. You're not okay. So if you ever want to talk about it, you know I'm here. I nodded, forcing the lump in my throat down. I didn't know if I could ever talk about it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because if I started, I wasn't sure I could stop. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. It wasn't just about the lies we were both living. It was about something deeper, something darker. It was about me, about the woman I had become. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, and I didn't know how to find my way back. The conversation shifted after that, like it always did, but the question lingered in my mind. How had I ended up here? How had I ended up lying to the one person who knew me better than anyone else? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing: this wasn't the life I had imagined. And somewhere, deep down, I was starting to wonder if I would ever be able to fix it. As the days went by, Lena's words haunted me. "You're not okay." It echoed in my mind at the oddest moments, when I was brushing my teeth, when I was waiting for the train, when I was alone in our bedroom. It wasn't the first time someone had noticed. Jason had said it too, his voice thick with frustration when he'd found me staring at the ceiling, not really being anywhere. But with Lena, it was different. She was my closest friend, the one who knew the old me, the girl who had dreams and laughter in her eyes, the girl who believed in fairy tales. And now I was a stranger to her, a stranger to myself. The day after our conversation, Jason still hadn't come home. That wasn't unusual anymore. We had drifted so far apart, I couldn't even remember the last time we shared a moment of genuine connection. It was always business, finances, chores, what the dog needed, where to go for the next holiday. But we never talked about us. That morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower running, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, and the dull hum of the air conditioner. Jason's things were still scattered around the house, his shoes by the door, his jacket slung across the arm of the couch. Everything was normal. But I wasn't. I picked up my phone, scrolling through texts I'd already read 100 times. No reply from Jason. His last message had been 3 days ago, and it was a simple, "I'll be home later." That was it. I had responded with a "take care," because what else was I supposed to say? It had been like that for so long. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me as I stood there, half-dressed, staring at the phone in my hands. My reflection in the mirror looked tired, worn. My eyes were dull, lips tight. I wondered if Jason had noticed. But then again, I wasn't sure he cared. Or at least, he didn't care enough to show me. The day dragged on. By the time the sun began to set, I had convinced myself that I needed to do something. Something different. Something bold. Lena had invited me to dinner, and I debated whether or not I should go. What could I tell her? How could I explain the gulf between Jason and me, the way we both wandered the house like ghosts, never speaking, never touching? I didn't want to unload on her again, but I couldn't help it. I sent her a quick text, "I'll meet you at 7?" Her reply was almost instantaneous. "Of course. Let me know if you need anything." I smiled, but it was fleeting. The truth was, I didn't know what I needed. What did I want? A change, maybe. A shift in perspective. A reminder of the life I used to have. But how could I change anything when I didn't even understand what had broken? Dinner was quiet, at least at first. Lena was the type of friend who never pressed for details unless I was ready to give them. But even in her silence, I could feel the weight of her concern. Her eyes watched me closely, but she said nothing. We ordered food, sipped wine, and made small talk, but nothing felt natural. Nothing felt right. And then, almost as if the universe had decided I was ready, I heard the question I knew was coming. "So, what's going on, Claire?" I looked at her, surprised by how easily the words came out. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer right away. She just set down her fork, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're different. I know you. And I know something's been wrong for a while now. And don't give me the everything's fine crap, because I can see it in your face. I can see it in the way you talk. I know when something's eating at you." I didn't respond at first. The words that were swimming in my mind were tangled, messy, and I wasn't sure I could say them aloud. But then, like a dam breaking, the truth spilled out. "It's Jason," I said, my voice small, but steady. "It's us." Lena sat back in her chair, her face softening. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to collect myself. "I don't know how we got here. I don't know what happened, but his checked out. And so have I. We're just existing. We don't talk. We don't connect. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. He doesn't even see me anymore, Lena." Lena's face softened with sympathy, but it wasn't the kind of pity I had expected. She didn't look at me like I was fragile, or like I was failing. She looked at me like someone who truly understood. Like someone who had been there. "You don't deserve to feel invisible," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know how much you love him, Claire. But if he's not showing up, then maybe it's time to ask yourself why you're still fighting for something that's already broken. The words cut through me. They were harsh, but in that moment, I needed them. The truth was hard, but it was also freeing. I don't know if I can fix it anymore, I admitted, the weight of the realization pressing down on me. I don't even know if he wants to fix it. Lena reached across the table, her hand warm and comforting. You deserve someone who sees you. Who makes you feel seen. Don't settle for a relationship that's become a shadow of what it was. Her words were a balm, but they also left a sting. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear them, but I couldn't deny that they felt true. I looked down at my hands, fidgeting with the napkin, trying to gather my thoughts. What do I do, Lena? How do I even begin to fix this? Lena leaned in, her eyes kind and understanding. Start by letting go of what you think you should do. Forget the right way to fix things. Just be honest with yourself. What do you want? What do you really want? Her question was like a lifeline, pulling me out of the fog. I didn't have the answer right away, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might be able to find it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind buzzed with everything Lena had said, everything I had said, and the gnawing feeling that had settled deep in my chest. The truth had been exposed in a way that felt both terrifying and freeing. I was standing at a crossroads, but I wasn't sure which path to take. Was I ready to face the consequences of what I was about to do? Was I ready to confront the reality that the life I had carefully constructed might be nothing more than a mirage? I tossed and turned, unable to find peace. Jason wasn't home again, of course, but it didn't sting the same way anymore. It was like I had become numb to his absence, like it no longer mattered when he was there or not. What mattered was the emptiness that filled the space between us, the way we had drifted so far apart that even when we were in the same room, we might as well have been strangers. I kept thinking about what Lena had said, you deserve someone who sees you. It echoed in my mind, wrapping itself around my heart like a warm, comforting embrace. But it also made me feel incredibly small. How had I allowed myself to become so invisible? How had I let my marriage fall apart without even realizing it? In the morning, I woke up with the same ache in my chest, the same feeling of stagnation. I dragged myself out of bed, the sheets tangled around me, and stumbled to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face, staring at the reflection in the mirror. I was exhausted. But more than that, I was lost. The next few days were a blur. Jason's absence became even more pronounced. He wasn't just absent physically, he was absent emotionally, too. He didn't even attempt to explain his whereabouts or apologize for breaking promises. His silence was suffocating. I tried to fill the space. I went to work, I saw friends, I tried to be normal. But everything felt like I was acting. Like I was playing a role in a life that wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I wasn't sure who Jason was, either. One night, I found myself standing in front of our front door, key in hand, staring at the lock. Jason's car wasn't in the driveway. It hadn't been for hours. I could feel the frustration building in my chest, the urge to confront him, to demand answers, to demand the man I had married back. But something stopped me. Something held me back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the key, to slam the door, to make it all end. But instead, I stood there, frozen. That's when I realized something. I didn't know who I was waiting for anymore. Was I waiting for the husband I used to have? Or was I waiting for someone else entirely? Someone who might never come back. I decided to call Lena. I needed her. I needed someone who wasn't wrapped up in the confusion of my life, someone who could help me see things clearly. I need to talk to you, I said, the words coming out in a rush as soon as she picked up. Of course, Lena replied, concern evident in her voice. What's going on? I'm just so lost, Lena, I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who Jason is anymore. I don't know what to do. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You've been holding on for so long, Claire, she finally said, her voice soft but firm. But you can't keep waiting for someone to change. You can't keep waiting for him to wake up and see you. You're worth more than that. Her words pierced through the fog in my mind. She was right. I had been waiting. I had been waiting for Jason to realize what we had lost, waiting for him to fix it, waiting for him to wake up. But that wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to either of us. Then what do? I asked, the question feeling like a plea. Lena's voice was steady, confident. You have to decide, Claire. You have to decide if this is the life you want. If it's worth holding on to, or if it's time to let go. Her words were simple, but they landed with such force that I felt the weight of them deep in my bones. It was time to decide. I had been stuck in limbo for so long, clinging to a memory of what our marriage used to be. But memories weren't enough anymore. They couldn't hold us together. I looked around the house, my eyes lingering on the empty spaces where Jason's things used to be. His jacket on the couch, his shoes by the door, his scent in the air. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else, someone I didn't recognize anymore. I had to be honest with myself. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I couldn't keep waiting for Jason to change. He wasn't coming back. Not the way I needed him to. I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. It wasn't about giving up, it was about freeing myself from a life that no longer fit. It was about giving myself permission to let go of the past, to stop holding on to something that was broken beyond repair. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for Jason anymore. I wasn't going to keep living in the shadows of what we once had. I was going to take control of my life, of my future, and find a way to live again. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But I had to do it. For me. The next few days felt like a blur. Everything was in a state of suspended animation, as though my life had been put on hold while I tried to summon the courage to face the truth I had been avoiding for so long. Every moment with Jason felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for something to change, for him to wake up, for him to reach out, to apologize, to say he loved me like he used to. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Instead, I spent my days caught in a fog of indecision, of fear, of guilt. The guilt that I was giving up on something that had once been so good. The guilt that, in trying to find myself again, I might be destroying everything we'd built. And then, there was the fear of being alone. The fear that, without Jason, I would have nothing, that I would be nothing. I sat on the couch one evening, staring at my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I could text him. I could tell him how I was feeling, how broken I was, how desperately I needed him to understand. But I knew it wouldn't make a difference. The man I was trying to reach wasn't the man who had left months ago. I didn't know who he was anymore. I pressed the screen with a sigh, locking the phone and placing it down beside me. I was done. It was time to stop clinging to the past, to stop hoping for something that wasn't coming. But what did that mean? What came next? I picked up my phone again, but this time, I didn't look at Jason's contact information. Instead, I opened the message from Lena. I hadn't responded to her in a few days. I knew I needed to talk to her. I needed someone to guide me through this. Lena, how are you feeling? You've been quiet. We should talk. I let out a breath, typing my response slowly. I'm scared, Lena. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if I can keep going like this. But I'm also afraid to let go. I stared at the screen, wondering if I was making a mistake. But then my phone buzzed with her reply. Lena, you don't have to have all the answers right now. You just need to make the choice that's right for you. And if it's too hard to do it alone, I'm here for you. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. She was right. I didn't have all the answers. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could figure things out on my own. For so long, I had been waiting for Jason to change, to fix things. But in truth, I had been the one standing in the way of my own happiness. I thought back to what Lena had said earlier, about deserving someone who truly saw me. I had spent years living in the shadows of my own marriage, afraid to be seen, afraid to confront the truth. But I was tired of hiding. I was tired of waiting for someone else to make me feel whole. I had to be whole on my own. The next few days were filled with small decisions, quiet moments of self-reflection. I started to reclaim parts of myself I had forgotten. I dusted off my old journals and began writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to try but had never had the time for. I found myself laughing again, something I hadn't done in a while. But the hardest decision still loomed over me. I had to talk to Jason. I had to tell him the truth, even if it meant shattering everything we had left. It was Friday night when it finally happened. Jason walked through the door, his briefcase in hand, his coat slung over his arm. He didn't say anything, didn't ask where I'd been or what I'd been doing. It was as if he had already checked out, and I had become a ghost in my own home. Jason, I said, my voice sounding much steadier than I felt. We need to talk. He glanced at me, the corners of his mouth lifting in a faint, almost amused smile. About what? This isn't working, I said, the words coming out more easily than I expected. You're not here, Jason. I'm not here. We're not here. He stopped, his gaze hardening. I'm not sure what you mean. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. I mean that we're living in different worlds. You're gone all the time, and when you are here, you're not really here. I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't know who I am in this relationship. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. There was a long silence, the air heavy between us. Jason's face softened, but only for a moment. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Claire, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm not the same person I was when we got married. You're not either. I know, I said, my voice trembling slightly. But I'm ready to figure out who I am now. And I can't do that while I'm waiting for you to change. Jason looked at me for a long time, his expression unreadable. So what, you just want to walk away from everything we've built? I'm not walking away, I said, my voice firmer this time. I'm walking towards something. I'm walking towards myself. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he shook his head. I don't know what that means, Claire. It means, I said, taking another step towards him, that I need to let go. I need to let go of the idea that we can go back to how things were. I need to stop waiting for you to come back to me. I need to come back to myself. Jason's eyes darkened, and I could see the hurt there, but there was something else too, something like resignation. I'm sorry, Claire, he said quietly. I really am. But I don't think I can give you what you need. I know, I said, my heart breaking in that moment. And I can't keep waiting for you to. I need to take care of myself now. We stood there for a long time, the silence stretching out between us, filled with unspoken words. The weight of our shared history, the years we had spent together, was heavy in the air. But there was also a sense of finality, like we were finally acknowledging the truth that had been staring us in the face for so long. I guess this is it, then, Jason said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I guess it is, I replied, my voice trembling despite myself. It was the end of something, but also the beginning of something new. The day after my conversation with Lena, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a grand revelation, not something magical, but more like the lifting of a heavy weight that had been pulling me down for so long. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of something close to hope, hope for myself, hope for the future, even if it was uncertain. Jason hadn't come home that night. Of course, he hadn't. It wasn't a surprise anymore. His absence no longer stung the same way it used to. It wasn't even something I had to think about, it was simply another part of the routine, another reminder that we were two people living parallel lives, both pretending things were fine when they were far from it. I stood in the kitchen that morning, staring at the coffee machine, letting the scent of brewing coffee fill the silence. The soft hum of the machine was oddly comforting, a small but steady reminder that the world outside was still turning, still moving forward. I had spent so many months, even years, frozen in place, waiting for Jason to come back to me. Waiting for him to snap out of whatever funk he was in, waiting for him to notice the distance between us. But I had been holding on to an illusion, one that had slowly faded, leaving nothing behind but the remnants of what could have been. I needed to move forward. The thought wasn't as terrifying as it had been before. It wasn't the huge, overwhelming decision it once felt like. It was just something I had to do. No dramatic ending, no final confrontation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that things had changed, and so had I. I picked up my phone and stared at it for a moment before dialing Jason's number. It rang twice before he picked up, his voice thick with sleep. Hey, he said, sounding groggy and distant, as usual. What's up? I hesitated, unsure of where to start. But I knew I couldn't keep tiptoeing around the truth anymore. I had to say it, no matter how hard it was. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. Now? Can't it wait? He muttered. No, it can't, I replied firmly. I'm done waiting, Jason. Done pretending that everything is fine. We're not fine. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought he might hang up. But then he sighed. Okay. Let's talk when I get home. No, I said, feeling a surge of courage. I can't do this when you get home. You're never really home anyway. I need you to listen now, Jason. Another pause. I could almost hear him shifting on the other end of the line. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, forcing the words out despite the tightness in my throat. I've been holding on for too long. Waiting for you to wake up, to realize what's slipping away. But you're not coming back to me, not the way I need you to. And I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. there was silence on the other end. I could hear the soft background noise of his apartment, the faint sound of a television playing in the background, but Jason was silent. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, and that scared me more than anything. "Claire," his voice was low, but there was a certain hesitation in it now, one I wasn't used to hearing. "I didn't know you felt like this." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. It was too late for apologies. Too late for regret. That's the problem, Jason. You never knew because you weren't paying attention. I could feel the weight of the conversation in my chest, the heaviness of a decision I knew would change everything between us. "I'm done," I said, the words coming out almost like a whisper. "Done waiting. Done holding on to something that's already gone." For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the kind that pressed in on me like an invisible force. My heart was pounding in my chest, the adrenaline of the moment making everything feel sharper, clearer. This was it. This was the moment where I decided my life wasn't going to be defined by Jason, by his absence, by his inability to see me. "Claire," Jason said again, his voice quieter this time. "You don't mean this." "I do," I said firmly, my voice growing steadier. "I do mean this. I've been lying to myself for so long, thinking things would magically get better. But we've been living in this toxic cycle for too long, Jason. And I can't keep doing it. I deserve more than this." "I didn't know," he said again, like that somehow made it better. Like the fact that he hadn't known was some kind of excuse. But it wasn't. It wasn't enough to fix what was broken. "Maybe you didn't know," I said, my voice growing firmer, more resolute. "But I've known for a long time." I hung up the phone before he could say anything else. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for years felt just a little bit lighter. The truth, no matter how hard it was to face, felt like freedom. It wasn't the end I had imagined. It wasn't some dramatic fight or emotional breakdown. It was just a quiet realization that the best thing I could do for myself was let go. I couldn't change Jason. I couldn't make him see what I saw. And I couldn't keep living in a relationship that wasn't serving me anymore. But I could change my own story. I could take control of my life again. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.